everyone, welcome to a brand new video. So today we are covering the mighty Russia. I was asked on Discord to do this as one of my next tip videos. By no means am I saying I'm a Russia expert. These are just some of the tips and tricks that I've picked up over the months that I've been playing Geoguessr. Most of them are pretty simple. It's mostly to do with the fact, whether it's Russia or Europe or whereabouts in Russia you might be. I've got some top tips for you and hopefully these help. So let's get to it. Top tip number one. So as you know, top tip number one is always going to be the coverage in Russia. Russia looks pretty scary because it's so big and you can lose so many points. If you're guessing over here and it's all the way over here, then you're going to lose a lot of points. However, if you look at the coverage that Russia has, it doesn't look so scary anymore. You've obviously got clusters of destinations, so around the bigger cities such as Moscow, St. Petersburg, down near Sochi and the southern part of Russia. And then as you can see, you've kind of got a few clusters around these cities and also running along the north of the borders between Kazakhstan and Mongolia, all the way down to Vladivostok. The coverage doesn't look that scary when you see it like this. So if you are going to try and guess in Russia, don't guess over here because you're not going to get any points. Guess somewhere where the bigger clusters are of destinations and Street View. Top tip number two. So top tip number two is the Google car in Russia. So Russia has a few different variants of its Google car and it's not always the same. So I don't know, it's probably quite hard to see, but this car is a black Google car. The antenna is pretty long on this car. This is one of the most common Google cars that is used in Russia, and this can help you determine away from Ukraine, for example, because Ukraine has a red car with a long antenna, and sometimes parts of Ukraine and Russia have similar landscapes, so that can definitely help you there. But you do often see some other Google cars, which I'll show you just now. So this isn't the best example, but sometimes you also get a white car with the long antenna, so sometimes you do have a smaller antenna as well. Top tip number three. So top tip number three is just general signs, bollards, posts that you might see in Russia. So Russia doesn't have a specific bollard or road marker or whatever you want to call it. It just kind of uses the ones around Europe. I don't know if you've watched my Europe bollard video. I'll link it somewhere on the screen right now so you can go have a look at it. But the difference between those countries and Russia is that Russia likes bollards so much that they decide to put tons and tons of them on their intersections or their junctions. So as you can see, there is a multitude of bollards here. So you've got about 7 or 8 of them just on this junction alone. You've also got some up here as well. They don't always use the same ones. Sometimes they use ones from Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, Austria. Another thing about Russia is that on some of its road signs, not all of them, they have this black paint painted on the bottom of their poles. It's usually on these kind of symboled road signs. I don't see them that often, but if you do see one, that's a really good hint that you're in Russia. So another thing that I often see in Russia is these massive signs. These massive designed signs are quite often featured on Russian roads. They're usually telling you that you're entering some kind of city or a county or state. I don't know what they call them in Russia, but it's basically telling you that you're entering somewhere different, and they're usually quite elaborate and they're usually very big at the side of roads. So that's another good sign that you're in Russia. So another thing that I see quite often in Russia are these pedestrian signs. Obviously these pedestrian signs are quite often seen in Europe. However, in Russia I see them a lot with these kind of neon trims on them. You do sometimes see them without, but most often with. You do see them occasionally in some countries, but mostly in Russia. But you do see them on major roads and in cities as well. Top tip number four. So top tip number four is basically determining whether we should guess in the east or the west of Russia. There are some clues that can definitely help you guess in the east of Russia or in the west of Russia. So I'm going to help you here by showing you a few different areas along the west of Russia and the east of Russia, and we're going to slowly transition from east to west, and hopefully this can show you some different areas or distinctive areas that you might be able to guess in the future. So the first place I'm going to show you is the island of Sakhalin. This is located just above Japan. Okay, so we're on the island of Sakhalin, and one of the main things that makes me determine between East and West Russia. And something that I learned fairly recently, always look at the cars in Russia. Obviously in Russia, most cars have their steering wheel on the left-hand side of the car. So if you're sitting in the car, it's on the left-hand side. But in Russia, in some parts of Russia, especially the east side of Russia, the driving wheel can sometimes appear on the right-hand side. This is due to the fact that Russia is fairly close to Japan at this point, and a lot of its cars are imported from there. So obviously Japan drives on the left, the same as the UK, and so their driving side is the same as the UK as well. So if you're used to this driving side, such as I am, you are most likely on the east side of Russia. You may see a lot of Asian branded cars in this part of Russia as well, but always look at the steering wheel side because this can definitely help you here. Another thing about Sakhalin as well is the fact that it's also very mountainous, but seeing as it is close to Japan, it does make sense. These mountains here have snow on them, so it indicates that they are pretty high. That's another thing to consider. Okay, so I've moved a little bit further west and we are outside the city of Chita. This part of Russia is pretty mountainous. You've got quite a few forests as well, so that's something else to consider, and especially later on you'll definitely see a difference between this location and definitely bits that are further west. Okay, so I've moved again a little bit further west and we are now in Irkutsk. I hope I'm saying that right. Again, it's very densely forested in this part of Russia. You also have some high bits of elevation here too. It's pretty hard to see because we're covered with forests. Okay, so we've moved again a little bit further west and we are now in Novosibirsk. I hope I'm saying that right again. There's a bit of a difference here. We still have some trees here, quite a lot of trees surrounding the road. But if you can see through the trees, it's not as high this time. So the ground is pretty flat around this part of Russia. Okay, so we are now near Omsk, which is again a bit further west. You're starting to see the difference now. It's very, very flat. You've got loads of fields around you, quite open spaces behind these lines of trees. You still have the trees though. It's not like completely deforested, but it's definitely a lot more open than the previous locations that we've just seen. Okay, we are now near Chelyabinsk, so we've travelled a little bit more further west, and there is a bit of a difference here. So I would say that the grass is definitely slightly higher, and there are a few more patchy areas of trees in this section. So near Chelyabinsk, there are actually quite a lot of areas of water. So these areas of water, I'll show you on the Google map. So as you can see, there's lots of pockets of water around this area. Okay, so we are now actually quite near Moscow. The main thing to distinguish this part of Russia, so obviously the closer to the bigger cities you go, the better the infrastructure, so the better the roads. You get a lot more kind of petrol stations around. It's a little bit more dense in terms of traffic and stuff like that. So if you're on one of these like main highways or motorways and you're not sure where we are, we're probably close to a bigger city, so probably in the west side of Russia. So this is very, very different to the last location I just showed you. This is very far west in Russia. This is quite near St. Petersburg and quite near the borders with the Baltic states, so such as Estonia and Latvia. Something that you will know if you've played Geoguessr is that the Baltic states have a lot of these dirt tracks covered with forests either side of you. I would probably say the main differences are the colour of the dirt. I know that sounds really weird. The Baltic states I would say are a little bit lighter in colour, so Estonia is a bit more of a sandy colour, a bit whiter than I would say this colour is. One thing to consider is that the trees will be very similar, so these kind of trees you will see in Estonia and Latvia, but also these purple flowers. Now we kind of have a joke in the Geoguessr community that Estonia are covered in white flowers. Well, Russia's covered in purple ones. Let me know if the purple flower thing is a thing for Russia. So lastly, I'm going to show you this part of Russia, and a lot of this part of Russia near the Georgian border is incredibly mountainous, but I'm going to show you this part of Russia which is quite near Kazakhstan, because I think there is a big difference here in the coverage that I've shown you. This is near Astrakhan, which is in the southern part of Russia near Kazakhstan. And I think the thing to note about this part of Russia is that it just feels a lot drier. It feels a lot more desert-like. I wouldn't say it is a desert, but it's definitely more desert-like. The soil is a lot lighter. It's a lot more sandy. So this is near Astrakhan in Russia. Okay guys, so those are my top tips for Russia. I haven't gone into too much detail. I'm not the best player at Russia. I definitely need to get better. I think if you're wanting practice on Russia, I would definitely recommend doing the 25k gold run in Russia. Practice makes perfect, and you're only going to get better at Russia, I think, by taking those kind of different landscapes on board, and hopefully this helps you too. So do let me know in the comments if it did. Also let me know in the comments what other videos you'd like me to do. But in the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time, either on the stream or on a next YouTube video. Thank you, bye!